हमारे वक्त की धड़कन, हमारा चिंतन, हमारी भावनाएं, हमारे विचार, कभी कोमल बातचीत तो कभी इंटरेक्शन तेज तर्रार। तय करें मिलकर व्हाट इज रॉन्ग, व्हाट इज राइट। आईटीवी पर अशोक व्यास के साथ इनसाइट टुनाइट।
The attraction of Indian culture transcends the boundaries of our country. Globally, we are all a reflection of Indian ethos, so it has to be Indian in some manner.
Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas and I'm delighted as well as honored to be sitting with none other than permanent representative of India to United Nations, Ambassador Syed Akbaruddin Sahab in his office. And as I extend this joy from me to you, I also welcome him real quick in his own office for this conversation for the viewers of ITV. It is such an emotional moment when you sit with someone who is representing India, and you have been spokesperson for Ministry of External Affairs, and there is a lot of history in terms of your relationship with media, starting with your father's role. But let me begin by this sense of responsibility which becomes a part of you when even if you are speaking for yourself, you are responsible when you speak for a group, and how it makes you feel when you speak on behalf of a great nation like India.
Well, thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to interact through you to your viewers. It's always an honor and privilege to represent a country of 1 billion people, a country with a history, a country with a bright future. And as diplomats, in our early days, we recognized the responsibility that it places on us. So it's a responsibility that we take seriously. It's a responsibility that we try and fulfill to the best of our abilities, because when we articulate a view, people always think that it's the view of a country. It's always a difficult task to do that. Because the responsibility is so onerous, but we try and do our best in the circumstances. After all, we are all human, so sometimes we err, for to err is human.
To err is human, but there has been a sense of wonderful words coined by Akbaruddin Sahab, which find references again and again, be it related to friend enemies or expressions where he says that mending is better than ending. But let me go to the beginning. So as a child, when you were growing up, was this one of the dream that you cherished to be in the position where you are?
So I was fortunate that my parents always did mention to me that whatever you want to do, do it with passion. And so they almost gave me a carte blanche in terms of pursuing my passion. And yes, it was always my passion to represent our great country. And I'm grateful that I was able to get that opportunity to follow my passion. And so I'm still passionate about my job because it's a passion to me. It's not a daily job.
And talking about your passion, which involves communication, understanding, ability to grasp and reproduce and articulate, and not only reproduce, but also add with your sense of intelligence and insight related to the happenings of the moment in the backdrop of the history of a nation, as well as policy of the government at the particular point of time. So I think it's quite a lot. But let's talk about your grooming in playing the role that you are playing and the role that your father has played, as well as his being a part of Jamia Usmania University's journalism and communication departments had. When you recollect those days, was there anything that stayed with you from him?
Well, both my parents were professors at the university, so I grew up with books. I grew up with going to libraries. I grew up with people who were of a similar, had similar interests in terms of academics. And diplomacy requires a lot of academic input. So what I learned in my initial formative years still is a part of me because as you know, in diplomacy, without a lot of academic inputs, you can't make your point. Ultimately, it's all about human resources, and human resources can only be honed by better academic inputs.
Talking about academic input, any favorite author or any style that helped you in developing keen interest towards books? Was it the influence of your mother, who was in the faculty of English department with Sri Satya Sai University?
Well, yes, increasingly, if you see many of my statements, I use a lot of literary idioms. And that's because as a child of an English teacher, I grew up with poetry and prose, which was familiar to me, and that was English literature. And so it's perhaps easier for me to recollect things from my formative years and to use it in a manner which can be useful in my day-to-day life.
So let's go back to your parents, and starting with the personality of your father, who also was ambassador of India to Qatar. So what you heard from him in terms of his experiences, his challenges, or anything that he shared, do you recollect that? And it is an extension of his legacy in a very special way through you, looking at your family also.
Well, my father was, as you said, ambassador to Qatar. Qatar is a country where we have a large number of Indian nationals working in across a broad spectrum. So what I can recollect from what he advised me was that it was important to care for your nationals in whatever capacity they came. Unlike me, he was very fluent in Malayalam. So he was able to converse with a large section of the Indian population which came from Kerala there. And so what I took home from that experience was that it's important to pay attention to consular issues. Although today in my current job I don't handle those, but it's always been an area of interest to me, and an area where I always have focus, because how our countrymen are reflected outside has an impact on how our country is perceived. And therefore, trying to address their issues is an important aspect for all diplomats.
Talking about diplomacy, and many times people use the word diplomacy as a way of evading the original thing and making it appear as something else. I mean, that's how common men many times use. If you say something, they say you are being diplomat, meaning you are not being honest. But in your case, in your personality, I see a sense of authenticity and a sense of being grounded in the flow of Indian culture, or what India stands for. So let's talk a little bit about the assimilation of different nuances of India. It is known for unity in diversity, and we have had issues. We still have issues. When I say issues, in terms of communal harmony or certain tensions here and there. But in essence, when we say Indianness and the sense of unified approach towards humanity, not just towards India, that is reflected in your personality, even if one is not talking to you. So let us hear some of the impressions which you imbibed as you were growing up in India, culturally or otherwise.
Well, growing up in India means a respect for pluralism, a respect for diversity. Indians are diverse in many ways. Every 50 kilometers to 100 kilometers in our country, if you go, the language changes, food habits change, and clothing changes. But there is a commonality among all of us, and that's what we learn as we grow up. Growing up in India means being accommodative to each other's concerns, because we are so diverse, we are so different from each other. We can only live together and in harmony if we accommodate each other. That always reflects in the ability of Indians to do well outside. Outside India, you face an environment of great diversity, and the ability of Indians to do well outside India is reflected because of the ethos that they imbibe as they grow up, that you have to accommodate, you have to adjust, and you have to live with each other. Live and let live has been a ability of ours to that it is intrinsic to our culture. And therefore, we generally do very well outside. Now, your point about issues that we may have, obviously, we're a country of 1 billion people. 1 billion people, we're also a very argumentative people. And this is not because it's new or because it's democratic. It is because if you have a conglomeration of such diversity, living with each other, there are bound to be differences. But our USP is not that we don't have differences. Our USP is that we are open, transparent, trying in the manner best that we can to accommodate our differences and move ahead.
Moving ahead in a democratic fashion is definitely a very, very special feature of India. And if I'm not mistaken, as a spokesperson for the Ministry of External Affairs from 2012 to 2015, you have seen two different governments. How was it, that transition of a government which comes with totally different, apparently visible, loudly heard agenda or approach, and working with the previous government as a diplomat? Do you need to make some complicated adjustments, or it just flows smoothly?
So, as diplomats, we represent a country. Governments come and go in a country, but a country and a state exists beyond governments. And that's a nature that is very different for diplomats compared to civil servants within India. Because the world sees India as a country and doesn't identify itself with a government or another government. That said, as civil servants and as diplomats, we need to be receptive and sensitive to the changes in our country. And yes, in 2014, things changed because we voted as an entirety to change our government. And therefore, as diplomats, we were understanding and sensitive to what our countrymen have done. And that also gets reflected in some way or the other in our articulation of issues. While interests remain similar, there will always be a change of nuance, there will be a change of style, and at times a change of substance too. And that's what happened in 2014. And our ability to articulate those changes is what has led today to a better understanding of India, and an understanding that despite the changes, India means business in a much more assertive manner now than was previously.
Now, what you said is exactly what I was thinking about, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been more active with Indians abroad in lots of countries. Probably he's the first Prime Minister who visited, he connected, he energized, he mobilized. And allow me to also say, when there are elections and there are campaign rallies, he's not shy of taking the credit of having mobilized people abroad for India, as well as claiming that there is a more assertive position and important role that India is playing. So I think the same narrative flows through diplomats and it works for the nation. But when you look at it from the political prism, there are opposition parties who always question these kind of claims. Do you see that as something that needs to be given some sort of attention, considering the political waves?
In domestic politics, it is normal that some people claim something, some people claim something to the contrary. But from an international perspective, I think it is acknowledged by one and all that today's India is emerging in ways that we had not anticipated, say, even a decade ago. It is an India where many people are sitting up and taking notice of. Let me just give you a simple example in terms of our own work here at the United Nations. In 2014, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi articulated a vision for an International Day of Yoga. And it happened in less than 6 months that we were able to get the support of an unparalleled number of countries to support that initiative. Now, once that initiative was enshrined within the UN system, today it's a global goal that all of us work together in all countries of the UN on June 21st to try and emphasize an aspect of Indian culture which has great resonance. 15 years ago, this was not so, but just using a multilateral framework to project a aspect of Indian soft power is a distinctly innovative mechanism that has been adopted. And you could multiply these in many ways. But I've just drawn this one from my own example and narrate it to you. There are many such examples where it's normal for leaders to work very innovatively to find paths which have perhaps not been trodden in the past to try and promote aspects of India in very innovative ways.
Talking about innovative ways, how do you define your role as permanent representative of India at the United Nations? When I say define, there must be a clear-cut structure to your role, but then with innovative approach, probably you push the boundaries and probably there are new additions which come because of your vision.
Well, no, I always describe myself and view myself as a soldier who is on the front lines. A soldier on the front lines can only be as effective as the backup support he or she has. So, yes, the United Nations is a global platform. On that platform, what India does or is able to do is you only see the front office. You see me articulating a viewpoint, or you see me trying to work to gain support on an election or a candidate, etc. But behind that lies an enormous support system. That support system, of course, is not visible because diplomacy works well sometimes behind closed doors. But when we triumph, when we achieve something, it's me in the front who comes out, but there is a network of our global linkages which is being reflected in that outcome. So all I can say is I see myself as a trench warrior on the front lines, but behind that there is an immense network, and that immense network is responsible for the success that we can do on the front lines. And it's something that we should be grateful for. We have a political leadership which is willing to back us in innovative ways to try and take on issues and pursue interests that perhaps we have not done in the past.
Talking about the present and future also, and a sense of excitement about India, in India as well as outside India. And there are some steps which India takes in order to to maintain its self-esteem or sometimes to project its strength. And as you mentioned, there are few things hidden and they happen, and you may choose not to say anything about it. But let's say when there are instances like surgical strike to Pakistan, and it is, I think, inevitable that next day or next to next day somebody would approach you, could be from American media or in the United Nations. So do you get complete picture communicated to you in advance, or you are also getting it piece by piece as other people?
All I can say is, as regard the instance that you mentioned, we were informed before it was just put out to the press, because so that we could be ready in cases that we were approached on this subject. In such matters, secrecy is of the utmost importance, and the important thing is, once an action is taken, we are communicated very swiftly and provided with all the details so that we are ready to respond to any action or effort that may be taken contrary to our interest. But I'm glad to say, given the effort that we had made in preparation for all this, there was no action that was taken that could be termed as untoward towards our interest. So success sometimes lies in ensuring that there is no effort made, or the success of the effort that is still in its incipient stage is nipped in the bud.
Wonderful. And I think in last year or two, we have seen America taking a firm position with respect to Pakistan, and we have always felt that India is not as vocal as it should be with respect to its relationship with Pakistan and what it is getting, and the intrusion continues, etc. So talk to me a little bit about, do you have some role to play being here at the United Nations in terms of the way America formulates its policies towards this bilateral issue of India and Pakistan?
So India and Pakistan ties are primarily shaped in the region. What we or anybody else does outside the region has an impact, not an insignificant impact, but not the critical impact on such issues. Yes, our role is to ensure that our view is articulated in such a manner that it is not contested by Pakistan or other countries. So, for the last 2 years, Pakistan every time tries to highlight its sense of grievance, so to say, in public platforms, saying that there is an issue that they would like the world to focus on. There is an issue which they feel that they have been wronged. But it has, in the last 2 years, not even found a single echo on a United Nations platform. So, yes, Pakistan has maybe raised this issue several times, but on each occasion, it has not found a single supporter. And that's the success of Indian diplomacy, that Pakistan is now confined to being a lone voice in the wilderness, for which there is no purchase in the international system. And that's a success of Indian diplomacy globally. Some of us work on one platform here, but some of us work globally. And that global resonance is reflected in the deafening silence that any of Pakistan's pleas fall on in the UN platform. Not once, not one country has articulated any support for the Pakistani cause here at the United Nations.
mentioned about International Day of Yoga, and I had the good fortune of seeing you in action celebrating International Day of Yoga, and you also did some asanas. And sitting in your room here at your office, there is a sense of calmness. And I believe there are issues where everybody is agitated, and even if it is a team that you are rooting for, there is high passion. And here we're talking about nations. So if there's something about which people feel bad or angry, then as a diplomat, you have to distill that anger and put it in a very dignified and probably a polished manner. So that happens automatically, or sometimes you feel there is a sense of anger, but you manage to say it in a way which shows anger, yet it doesn't show anger.
Well, diplomacy is all about managing your emotions as well as managing your words. Words have meanings, they have implications, and therefore we learn over a period of time to articulate views what are best suited for the occasion. So sometimes we do express emotion, but in most cases, given that our interlocutors perhaps understand more rational articulations, we try and curb our emotions. But this is a practice that we learn over decades. It's not sometime natural. We are all passionate people. We all have passions. We all have emotions. But the way you need to articulate that is there's a time for all these things. And the United Nations is the place where you need to be, in a manner of speaking, rather balanced in articulation, because that's what India is known for, a balanced view on global affairs. Whether those global affairs impinge on us directly or indirectly, we always speak our mind, we always speak for a principle, but we speak with balance.
Talking about balance, you found a very good balance when you coined the word friend and enemies together, referring to China. I think there have been more developments on that front. Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji's probably surprise visit to China, and it seems that there is more clarity in terms of understanding each other as two nations, which have a very important role to play at this point of time in the global affairs. So tell me a little bit about how do you see where we are going with respect to China, and anything that draws your attention sitting here at United Nations from that aspect.
Well, India and China cumulatively account for more than 2 billion people. Therefore, we have a responsibility to all our people to work in a mature and balanced manner. That said, look at our traditions. India and China have a tradition, except for a occasion of a border war in 1962. We have a tradition of largely harmonious inter-exchange of our cultural ties, of ideas, of trade and commerce. And therefore, if you see the entire expanse of our interaction historically, as well as in the recent past, you will see that while we do have differences, we've learned to manage those differences. And Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping's interactions are in consonance with that tradition of two big countries, two leaders who are able to communicate in a manner that sends messages to their people and to the rest of the world. At the United Nations, India and China work together on some issues. We differ on some issues. For example, on issues of development, we have a common approach. On issues of climate change, we have a common approach. On issues of national sovereignty, we have a common approach. Yes, we have some differences on other issues. For example, we have differences on how do we address the scourge of terrorism. India and China both agree that you can't have good and bad terrorists. However, there have been instances where the Chinese have perhaps diverged from a matter of principle. So we've agreed to disagree on them. We will continue to pursue our goals because this is a principled approach, and we hope that our interlocutors from China understand the sensitivity of such matters. So in some issues we work together, some issues we agree to disagree, some issues we will continue to have differences and try and bridge those differences, both at the United Nations and elsewhere.
So finding harmonious way to resolve some of the conflicts on the border is also an important area which both countries are addressing. There are a few questions which I want to sort of seek your views on. And when you are away from India, some internal happenings are not directly related to you. And I don't know whether being here at United Nations, you get to hear from people about frequent gang rapes in India causing bad name for India also. And of course, everybody condemns that. But when you hear these kind of news items frequently coming in, how that puts you, you also feel little sort of on the back foot if someone comes and talks to you about women's position in India. It could be your colleague or anybody casually having a conversation about the state of women in India. How do you deal with that?
So let us not forget our tradition. India is a country which has revered women. We have goddesses, we have mother goddesses. So somewhere along the line, in the course of our history, we seem to have veered away from that traditional reverence that we have for women. And in the tumult of today's modern society, there have been instances where no civilized society is willing to accept that. But if you see, the reaction within India itself is that we acknowledge these shortcomings. As a society in transition, these shortcomings are perhaps inevitable. These are not something that we like. These are something that we abhor. But these are shortcomings we're trying to grapple with and trying to overcome. So, as a representative of India, while I do feel very sad at times when such occasions happen, but I immediately recognize that ours is a heritage which we are proud of. A heritage that men and women are seen on par, a vision that we would want our women to rapidly go up the ladder in terms of their societal positions, their economic positions. That's the vision we have. So our past is something that we are proud of. Our future vision on social issues is something that we are second to none. Yes, there will be aberrations and instances which sadden us, which we abhor, which we can all in our different ways react to, but that's not what all India is about. And I think those who work with us understand that India is much, much more than anomic instances which bring a sense of sadness and a sense of a feeling in us that there are places and aspects of our society that needs to improve.
And in the same context, sitting with you, I recollect presently quite a contrast. Our foreign minister, Sushma Swaraji, is a woman, and at this point of time, Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharamanji is also a woman. So that again gives a complete perspective in the context as you mentioned. And there's another woman at the United Nations of Indian origin who is talked about quite a lot in India. And as a diplomat, the role that Nikki Haley is playing in bringing better understanding between India and America. Any personal anecdote of interaction with her or the kind of role that you see her playing, your comments?
Well, Ambassador Nikki Haley is an asset to the US administration. She is also somebody who we deeply admire. She has never ever felt shy of indicating that she is a child of Indian immigrants. Her heart beats for India, is what she said once, and because her parents, when she was growing up, did inculcate in her a respect for their place of origin. And so we have extremely good ties with her. We wish her well, we wish her to rise, and we are extremely proud of the way she has conducted herself at the United Nations. And we are grateful that India has such a friend at such high positions in the current administration.
Well, two more quick questions, Ambassador. One related to your hope with respect to the initiative of America in denuclearization and the kind of negotiations which are happening with North Korea. How do you see, and the reference of Iran nuclear deal is also emerging. Trump administration has certain position. Do you see India has any role to play here? And due to lack of potential time that we may have, India, America, and Afghanistan, in that reference also, if you say something.
So nuclear issues have gained a salience which was not there some time ago, because they are existential issues for mankind, and therefore that the current administration has put them in the forefront of their diplomatic approach is an important step for all of us, because these have impact globally. They impinge on all our lives. How these will play out is at this stage a work in process. So I think it's best to be supportive of any efforts towards ensuring a global a world which will be shown of the threats of nuclear weapons. How that is achieved, there are different ways to achieve it. So there are certain processes in play. Let them take their course before we jump to any conclusion on that. So that's about nuclear issues, whether it is with Iran or with North Korea. As regards our own ties with Afghanistan and the United States, we all as Indians grew up with a warm feeling towards Afghanistan, because there are ties of a historical nature, of a civilizational nature between India and Afghanistan. Indians have in many, many ways contributed in the last 2 decades to Afghanistan's development, not only economically, but in many other ways. The US also has considerably put in a lot of effort, resources, human lives for trying to ensure that Afghanistan never goes back to the period prior to the beginning of this century. And in that, India's interests and those of the US converge. That convergence is the basis on which we are cooperating with the US on a host of issues relating to Afghanistan, and we work with the Afghan government, with the United States and India, because in some ways development is our forte. In some ways, peace and security is the American forte. If we can bring to bear both our USPs in this area, it would be for the benefit of Afghanistan, benefit of the region, and benefit of the globe.
Benefit of the globe is the focus in one or the another way of everyone. And sitting with Ambassador Akbaruddin Saab, I realized that he has also been passionate and actively involved in promoting some of the organizations which are catering to human needs across the globe in many countries. And as we speak today on 8th May, in the month of May, there's going to be an important exhibition and presentation about Jaipur Foot. Talk to me a little bit about your understanding of the work that this organization which came up with the idea of offering food free for anybody who needs, irrespective of the country, of their origin. And how significant do you think this 3-day event of Jaipur Food in the United Nations is?
So, the Jaipur Food is now more than 50 years offering a simple solution of prosthetics, which is also very economical. It caters to a section of the population which otherwise may not benefit from prosthetics. It has, over these 50 years, helped more than 1.5 million people in trying to restore some abilities which they thought they have lost. So our effort is to showcase such examples of humanitarian benefit on a global scale. I have requested many other ambassadors of countries who have benefited from the Jaipur Food Organization's abilities to provide for simple prosthetic appliances which work for people who otherwise would not benefit from this. And I can assure you that when we have this at the United Nations, including an exhibition, we will have a resonance about the humanitarian impact that this organization has had globally.
And I think that indirectly brings the kind of attention towards India which speaks for what India stands for, that is peace, coexistence, harmony. And if we refer to oft-quoted Prime Minister Narendra Modi's words, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, so that when you speak about that in Indian context, it is not restricted to India alone. Sabka Vikas means the whole world should prosperous and everybody should be happy. That is the idea, and I want to express my gratefulness and lots of thanks to you for having given us this opportunity to sit with you. And as I say goodbye to you, I have one more request. If there are some second generation Indian Americans or someone who get to hear you in India, what would you say makes a diplomat a good diplomat? And have you seen anybody as your role model from their point of view?
Diplomacy is all about the art of learning and evolving. So we have very many young diplomats. Also, increasingly, second generation Indian Americans here sometimes do intern with us. They understand India better in ways that you would not from outside. Now, perhaps the best way of learning is being exposed to working with diplomats. So I would encourage those who would be interested to intern with us. We provide opportunities of short-term internship whereby young people can come work with people just slightly above their age group and learn things. In terms of role models, every human being has within himself or herself some element that we can appreciate as another human being. So there will be elements of roles in every one of us that others can appreciate and imbibe. So as far as I can go, I learn from everybody, including from my interaction with you right now.
Thank you very much. And I also learned a lot. And I think there is a soothing quality about your expression, and you pay attention and you sincerely respond, and it makes your listeners happy, and I think that makes you a successful diplomat also. And lastly, a really last question. You have read many books. If you were to recommend one book which you think everybody should read, what that book be?
Well, I try and read as many books from history as possible. So, for diplomacy, there are books all across the world, whether it's Homer's Iliad or our own Mahabharata. There are aspects of diplomacy that you learn from these ancient, because diplomacy is a continuum. It hasn't started today, it doesn't end tomorrow. There are aspects of diplomatic practices that you can read, whether from the Peloponnesian War, or you can read from our own historical experiences of Chanakya. So I would suggest look into history if you want to look towards the future.
Thank you very much, Syed Akbaruddin Sahab, Ambassador, Permanent Representative of India at the United Nations. Such a pleasure and also a learning experience sitting with him here at his office and talking to him for the viewers of ITV with lots and lots of good wishes, sir. Thank you very much.
So this year also in October, the UN will have an Indian artist after a long time. So we will tell you. अभी सब बता देंगे तो फिर आप फिर पूछेंगे नहीं कुछ. सही नहीं. हमारा ये गोल रहा है कि लोग ये ना समझे कि हम बस एक बार योग दिवस मनाते हैं. तो इस वर्ष का जो हमारा गोल है ये है कि यूनाइटेड नेशंस में कई कंट्रीज़ के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स हैं. तो हमारा गोल ये है कि आज के जो योगा प्रैक्टिस सेशन होगा, इसमें दुनिया में सबसे डाइवर्स जो पार्टिसिपेशन है वो यहाँ होगा. इससे पहले जहाँ तक मेरा इन्फॉर्मेशन है, जहाँ तक मेरी इन्फॉर्मेशन है, 106 कंट्रीज़ के पार्टिसिपेंट्स थे. इस बार अभी तक हमारे पास कंफर्मेशन है 135 कंट्रीज़ के. तो ये पहली बार होगा कि इतने सारे कंट्रीज़ के पार्टिसिपेंट्स एक जगह मिलकर योगा की प्रैक्टिस कर रहे हैं.
और मैं कुछ दिन पहले ये सोच रहा था, जैसे हम अहिंसा को समर्पित दिन मनाते हैं, तो जो योग दिवस है वो भी एक प्रकार से विश्व में जहाँ इतने तनाव हैं, इतनी आतंकवादी घटनाएं हैं, तो ये दिन अपने आप में विश्व शांति को बढ़ाने की दिशा में एक महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाता है.
सही बात है कि योगा, जैसे अंग्रेज़ी में कहते हैं, योगा इज़ अ यूनिफाइंग फैक्टर. जो आप कह रहे थे कि टेररिज्म या अन्य प्रकार के और जो डिफ़िकल्टीज़ हैं, ये सब हैं फैक्टर्स विच डिवाइड पीपल. तो योगा हैज़ द यूनिक कैपेसिटी ऑफ यूनिफाइंग. सो वी होप कि आज के दिन में आप जब देखेंगे इतने सारे देश के लोग जहाँ यहाँ आए हैं, कि एक ही बस उनका मकसद है कि ये दे गो बियॉन्ड देयर divisions and work together.
And lastly, many times people hear and they think, oh, probably it's a good thing, but there is an initial inertia or hesitation. So what would be your tip to overcome that and start becoming a yoga practitioner?
I'm not the right person, but let me tell you, yoga has generated so much of interest कि we are overwhelmed by the number of people who have shown interest in yoga. हम कभी ये नहीं सोचे थे कि इतने सारे लोग योगा में इंटरेस्ट लेंगे, बट जब हमने अप्लाई किया, जब आज हमारे पास बस 700 लोगों के लिए जगह थी, 1300 ने अप्लाई किया है. तो देयर इज एनॉर्मस.
हमारे वक्त की धड़कन, हमारा चिंतन, हमारी भावनाएं, हमारे विचार, कभी कोमल बातचीत तो कभी इंटरेक्शन तेज तर्रार. तय करें मिलकर व्हाट इज रॉन्ग, व्हाट इज राइट. ITV पर अशोक व्यास के साथ इनसाइट टुनाइट.